Eddie Nestor's Drive Time. Weekdays from 4.
Afternoon to you, BBC Radio London, Drive Time. My name's Eddie Nestor. With me, the Mayor of London. So don't judge people by whether they come back. Welcome.
Good to be back, Eddie. I've been looking forward to this. You've been on holiday. I didn't realise the BBC allowed holidays to people like you, but there you go.
It wasn't a holiday, it was a working. It was people like you take holiday, like lots of emails coming.
It's great to be back, mate.
We want to take these. Let's just do one of these emails, shall we? Question for Sadiq. The Mayor wants better air quality, but there are no more and more Ubers, taxis, vans, cars, delivery drivers on the road. Would the Mayor consider opening the whole underground network up at the weekend, says Margaret.
I'm not sure what the question means about the underground network. The underground network is open all weekend with the night tube running all weekend. But your emailer is absolutely right. We've got huge congestions in London. The two biggest reasons, actually, are the massive increase in minicabs, private hire vehicles. It's gone from, roughly speaking, 60,000 8 years ago to 120,000 now. And secondly, more and more people in central London are ordering things that are delivered to work. So we're taking action on both those things in relation to consulting on whether we should remove the exemption from the congestion charge that minicabs don't pay at the moment. And secondly, TfL, Transport for London, is looking into, and we're giving financial aid to have mini consolidation centres in central London so people drop off deliveries by bikes rather than big vans taking one or two boxes in them. So your email is absolutely right. The congestion is caused by a rising population, but the way those who drive behave as well, more and more are doing it.
Let's talk to Paul. Paul has got a question for the Mayor. The Mayor's yours, Paul.
Hi, Paul.
Hi, Sadiq. How are you doing?
Not bad, mate. Not bad.
Good. My question is with regards to the crime levels in London. I understand from your announcement yesterday that you plan to take on the Glasgow model, which they used to successfully reduce their crime by looking at it as a health issue. My question is this: why is it taking us so long to accept something that obviously works? And since you are accepting it, what precautions are you taking to modify it to deal with the differences between Glasgow and London?
Well, Paul, thanks for your question. And you're right, the crime levels in London are unacceptable. They're unacceptable all around the country. Actually, for the last 2 years, we've been doing a lot of work. That's the public health approach. The public health approach basically means, Paul, you know this, but other listeners may not. It's treating crime as a public health issue. So treat violent crime as an infection. So stop the infection, stop it spreading, but also deal with the causes of the infection. So over the last couple of years, we've invested in policing, the £140 million in policing. That's led to this year a new violent crime task force that's dealing with the infection enforcement. Secondly, invest in young people. The Young Londoners Fund, £45 million, giving young people constructive things to do. And the third part of that is, as you allude, the violence reduction unit. And that's a multidisciplinary approach where we get the City Hall, the police, councils, the NHS, the youth sector, social services, schools, churches, faith communities working together to prevent people getting involved in crime.
And nevertheless, we've got more people dying than have ever died before in London.
Well, factually not correct, but I'll do that later if you want me to.
If you go through the war, we've got more young people being killed. We've got over 100 people dying in and around London.
Well, let me deal with the question you raised about numbers who are dying. Firstly, one is one too many. But actually, over the last few months, the increase has slowed down in our city, which is good news. But the figures published last week actually showed, for example, of the 100 people who've passed away, 21 were as a consequence of domestic abuse inside the home. We've got to take action against with helping.
Always been a high proportion.
Exactly right.
Always.
Half of the 100 are inside homes and offices. Some of these, obviously, with the greatest respect to the police who work incredibly hard, they've got to try and prevent somebody getting involved in violence in the first place. And you're right, too many teenagers have lost their lives this year, and we've got to take action in the prevention side. So, Paul, what we're doing is trying to give young people constructive things to do, but also realising, actually, we have data from the NHS, from social workers, from councils, that can help spot those families who may in the future have their young person involved in crime. So it's investing in them to use the data to avoid those families where there may be a risk getting involved in violent crime in the future, just like we would with a public health approach towards infections.
So to Harry. Harry's in Hammersmith.
Hi, Harry.
Hi there.
Good to speak to you, Harry. What's your question?
Sadiq, when you ran for mayor, I remember you saying that there would be no tube strikes. Do you regret saying that?
Well, firstly, Harry, thank you for allowing me to talk about industrial action on the tubes. I was quite clear. I didn't say there'd be zero tube strikes. What I said was the best way to reduce disputes with your staff is to talk to them. So the previous mayor, for example, refused to ever speak to the trade unions. And I've started a good working relationship with the trade unions. So just to give you the numbers, Harry, since I became mayor, we've had 65% fewer strikes than in the previous 8 years. And also, we've cut lots of the flab from TfL. Each year, we've made record savings from TfL. So I'm the first mayor to reduce the operating costs of TfL. TfL was formed in 2000. So we've managed to make savings, make cuts, but have fewer strikes than the previous mayor. And I want to apologise, Harry, for speaking to trade unions. Trade unions do a huge amount of good work representing their workers, and I'm hugely grateful for the TfL staff who work incredibly hard.
How are you going to fill the hole in the TfL budget?
Well, TfL's budget is always operating in deficit. So what's really important is we explain to Londoners that all public transport systems in the Western world are subsidised by central government. It's a public transport system. And so since 2000, when TfL was first formed, always in deficit. This government made a deal with Boris Johnson to reduce to zero the operating grant for TfL. On average, we're losing £700 million a year. Now, the business plan I inherited had no route to get to a budget surplus. I've got a route.
Why did you come in with the hopper then? Because the hopper has reduced even more the money they come in, and that has been stymied even more by the catastrophe of Crossrail.
Not true. So the hopper, which is where Londoners can use a bus for free for an hour after just paying the one fare, has led to 220 million journeys being made. And the evidence we have, when you compare buses in London versus buses across the country, is actually fewer people using buses across the country. The reason why more are using it in London is because of our fares freeze plus the hopper, but also it's encouraging people to use public transport. You can't on the one hand complain about congestion as your emailer did. Want to encourage people to walk, cycle and use public transport and not be affordable. And it's worth reminding your listeners, and I'm sure Harry would appreciate me saying this, is in the 8 years before I became mayor, the fares on TfL increased by more than 42%. I promised to freeze them. By freezing them, we're keeping passenger numbers high rather than passenger numbers going down.
If your levy is reduced by £700 million and you freeze fares, you do nothing to reduce the deficit, do you?
Well, no, because you get more people using public transport, which means, let me give you an example. So if you were going to use two buses now for the hopper, previously, you may have waited for one bus to do that journey. So we're not losing revenues because the person is using public transport. In relation to the fares freeze, because we're not seeing the massive drops, 4, 5, 6, 10%, other train companies around the country are seeing, we're not losing the fares as others would.
We'll come back to that because I want to ask you about Crossrail.
Sure.
That must have been embarrassing for certainly for London anyway. It didn't show that we were open for business. Lucy is on the line. Lucy, the mayor's yours.
Hi, Lucy.
Hi there. So I'm very excited about some of your clean air policies, like the ultra-low emission zone and cleaning up the buses. But I think we also need some very urgent action. So like many of London's most polluted schools, my children's school is on a very busy main road. And Hackney Council and TfL have been, unfortunately, refusing to move the bus stop that's just metres from the playgrounds for the last 2 years, where we have around 500 buses stopping just in school hours alone. And they're now proposing to close some other roads, which will lead to an increase of around 20% in traffic going past the school. So my question to you is, can you ever justify any measures that will increase pollution by a school that's already over the legal limit?
Well, Lucy, firstly, can you, after you've finished talking to me, give Eddie your details and I'll get my office to look into the particular bus stop you're talking about. What we're trying to do, you mentioned some of the policies we're doing. One of the other policies we're doing, Lucy, is what's called low-emission bus zones. So in the parts of London with the worst air, we have the cleanest buses, Euro 6 or those that are zero emission. And so even if there was a bus stop near your children's school, I would hope that there aren't the same sort of pollution coming out of the exhaust as there were previously. So that's why I'm keen to know what that is. But secondly, you're right. Some of the most vulnerable Londoners breathe the worst air. One of the pieces of research that was buried away by the previous mayor was the worst air in London has the most schools. So 460 schools are in areas where the area is illegal. Yeah. So we've given funding. We've given funding to schools to carry out audits in relation to what they can do to improve the air around the school, from planting trees, from greening, car parks, from helping schools in relation to their filtration system, to stopping idling outside schools, to working with councils to make some roads outside schools where cars can't go, to moving the entrance to a school. So, Lucy, give your details to Eddie's team after we've spoken, and I'll chase up your particular school. But you're right, we shouldn't have policies that increase pollution. Sometimes, though, because of the issues of congestion, we may need to do policies that reduce congestion. So I'll give you an example. In some parts of London, in the southeast, massive congestion caused by problems around the Rotherhithe and congestion there. So actually, I think a green solution to some of the challenges that businesses face there, that people face there with poor quality air, is the Silvertown Tunnel. Why? Because we can have one lane that's guaranteed just for green buses. We can also provide free services to those on foot or bike to get it from one side to the other. But secondly, it reduces the congestion in that part of London that's causing so much bad air.
How would you rate yourself so far as London Mayor?
Look, I'm working incredibly hard for our city. It's not for me to rate myself. What I want is in May 2020 for Londoners to give me their verdict. I've always said, I asked Londoners in May 2016 to lend me their vote. They've lent me their vote. I've got to prove to them by May 2020 that I've made sufficient progress to lend me their vote again for the next 4 years. I've always said the job of mayor can't be a 2-year job or a 4-year job. It takes some time to turn things around. So you mentioned Crossrail. Crossrail was conceived in the 1970s. It was given the green light in 2008. Some of these projects take a long time to bear fruit. Building a home, it takes from giving permission to home being built 3 years.
You made those promises, and there were many of us who looked at them and said, "Oh, those are 2 million trees. I'm going to build this many. I'm going to build."
I know you're trying to be accurate. It was never in my manifesto. Stop reading the Tory briefings from Tory HQ.
Tory briefings.
Those websites are dangerous. You're going to go blind. Go to those websites.
I'm going to tell you. that it seems to me that you want Crossrail, largest infrastructure project in the whole of Europe. It's an embarrassment, 600 million over budget, and then we hear 2 days before, and you say that you didn't hear any earlier, that it's not happening. That isn't great. I'll give you a list. You talk about the number of homes that are going to be built. There's huge numbers of people, as I make my journey home, sleeping rough on the streets.
Well, let me deal with those three. Let me deal with those points, each one. So, rough sleeping. In 2008, the previous mayor promised it would be zero by 2012. Right. It doubled by 2016, going from 4,000 to 8,000. In my first year, we managed to plateau it. For the first time in 8 years, it didn't go higher. In my second year, we reduced it by 7%. I can't do it by myself, but working with charities, faith groups and others, we're making progress. So on rough sleeping, even you would have to accept that for the first time in 9 years, rough sleeping is going down, right?
No, so, not in my eyes. Not when I go home. I walk home and I live by Stratford and I see more people living in West. Come with me. When you put that on Twitter, I put, let me take you by the hand and lead you through the streets of London. I'm telling you, I see more. I can't lie.
But that's because there are still almost 8,000 people sleeping rough. It's a scandal. I accept it's a scandal.
Okay.
I'm saying even you have to give me credit for making some progress in reducing rough sleeping. Let me give you the second one you mentioned around housing. Last year, 2017, 2018, so 1 year, my first full year after becoming mayor, we had more social rented housing being started ever since they've had these powers. Even you can't argue with that stats. Why?
When will people be living in there?
Because we're giving pension. Well, it takes, as I said to you, it takes
no, I accept
2
that.
3
I'm
years.
asking you, when will people be living in
people are already living in the first London living rent homes. So these are the homes where you pay a third of average earnings. That's already started. So I've been to 2 separate properties where there are dozens and dozens of families living in those homes already. These are London living rent homes where you pay a third of average earnings. But
dozens.
The other stat... No. There's more than 50 in one of them. In the other one, there's more than... Well, I can give you the numbers exactly. But you said when all they start living, they've started in the London living rents. The second issue is council homes. Look, over the last 40 years, in London, since the Right to Buy scheme in 1980, more than 300,000 council homes have been sold off. Right, 300,000. So from the supply of housing, we've lost 300,000. The amount that have been replaced is 60,000. So for every 5 we lose, we replace 1. I've announced a scheme working with councils, and councils deserve massive credit, to start building 10,000 council homes over the next 4 years. Can you imagine a Conservative mayor building council homes with councils across London? And that's the progress we're making. But I'm not going to lie to Londoners. I never have. Go to my manifesto. I was quite sober about trying to promise and over-deliver. So, look, it's going to be a marathon, not a sprint. It'll take some time. But all I'd say is, look, there has been incremental progress over the last 2 years, but we've got to do better.
The Mayor of London, the voice of Sadiq Khan, speaking to London via Drive Time here on BBC Radio London. We get your calls on, as many of them as we possibly can. The Mayor's agreed to take your calls up until 6 o'clock. We'll either talk about the questions and the points that you have, or you may well want to pick up the Mayor on something he's already said. Gilly is in Belsize Park. The Mayor's yours.
Hi, Gilly.
Hi, Mr. Khan. I seem to be the only person in Eddie's show that's a cyclist with insurance, wears a helmet, and I've been cycling for 20 years and don't laugh, Eddie, and doesn't jump lights. But anyway, passing on, I wonder, and I had asked your previous incumbent, and I don't know if it ever got anywhere, have you considered, or has it been dismissed, phased lights, traffic light cycling? I believe that would obviate a lot of the argy-bargy between cyclists and these poor people that are driving.
We've already got it, I think. I was taking a drive down the original cycle superhighway. I spent a lot of time looking at. I had serious concerns in nature. This was before your time, Sadiq. And I was there, and certainly you come down past the McDonald's, and the bikes do go first. I think they already have it, Gilly.
So, Gilly, just to follow on from Eddie's point. I think Gilly's point is that not all traffic lights have this system. And so I had the pleasure today of opening Cycle Superhighway 6, which is 5 kilometres of Cycle Superhighway from Elephant and Castle to King's Cross, which joins Quiteway 2, which goes from Walthamstow to Bloomsbury, which is 12 kilometres. And what we've done, Gilly, is we've got a number of traffic lights there, which are, as Eddie's described them, where because we want to avoid cyclists being caught next to HGVs or other vehicles, they have a head start, if you like. And so we're trying to roll out more and more traffic lights as and when we can. But you're right, by smart design, Gilly, we can make it safer for cyclists and pedestrians to go about our city.
How many cycle superhighways have you unveiled in the 2 years since you've been there?
So we've unveiled 140 kilometres of cycle infrastructure. It's a combination of cycle superhighway, Quiteways and Millie Hollands. The cycle superhighways, I think, is 10 kilometres. The Quiteways is about 100 kilometres, and the Millie Hollands around 30 kilometres.
Yeah, you're talking about road space. I'm asking you about superhighways.
I said 10 kilometres. But
no. A cycle superhighway 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 kilometres isn't an answer to that question, Mayor.
Well,
what have you opened?
Well, cycle superhighway 6 is today from
which is an extension.
Elephant and Castle to King's Cross. Cycle superhighway 11, which is the Swiss Cottage one, was challenged in the courts by Westminster Council. Because of procedural point, we're going to look at that again. There are a number of other cycle superhighways that will begin. 4 will begin very shortly. We're doing consultation. But you'll appreciate TfL controls 5% of the roads in London, so we've got to consult the councils. Today's a really good example of Camden and Islington doing the right thing by cyclists like Gilly and working with us to have more cycle superhighways. In my first 2 years, by the way, Eddie, you talked about progress. We've opened more cycle superhighways than the previous mayor in his first 6.
See, it's interesting because Andrew Gilligan was on the show before, and he said
it's worth you explaining to listeners who Andrew Gilligan is.
Well, they know because he's just been on the show.
Right. So he's Andrew Gilligan.
But they know who he is. He's the former advisor to the Mayor of London, who is or was a cycling commissioner, who was Boris Johnson.
So Andrew Gilligan is Boris's friend, appointed by Boris without an open advertisement to be his cycling commissioner, who not unreasonably is defending his record. I didn't appoint him to carry on the job, and so just take with a pinch of salt what Boris's mate says.
Let's have a listen to what Andrew said about you and your achievements. Got an Andrew Gilligan? Well, I thought we had it. I've just been.
He's basically said, for those that didn't listen to him, he basically said Boris is fantastic, Sadiq is bad. I mean, I suspect that's what he said.
Well, your people say the same. You're just as bad.
Next caller, Eddie. Come on, let's take a caller.
Karen, good afternoon.
Karen, how are you? Karen, can you hear me?
Oh, hello.
Hello, it's Sadiq here. What's your question, Karen?
Hello, yeah. I understand that you've already touched on the crime in London, but what are you going to do about these, excuse my French here, lunatic moped gangs? I've lost 2 friends to violent crime in London, 1 friend to a moped gang. To be perfectly honest with you, I don't know how many more funerals I can go to. I've got a set of clothing in my wardrobe that's been used more times than I care to think. It's become an epidemic. It is an epidemic. What's going to be done about it?
Well, Karen, firstly, I'm really sorry about your loss. I mean, I can only imagine how distressing it must be for you. I've attended.
Don't tell me about my loss and distressing. Please tell me what you're going to do about the moped gang epidemic.
Well, I am sorry for your loss. And
Thank you very much.
So let me deal with the issue of moped crimes. What we're doing, it's not true to say that the police won't chase somebody on a moped. The police will pursue somebody on a moped, even if the moped rider takes his or her helmet off. And so it's really important to reassure you that the police take these crimes very seriously. The police also now have specialist bikes they use, because one of the things that was happening in the past were mopeds were going down alleyways and roads that vehicles that weren't mopeds could go down. So the police now have specialist bikes, scrambler bikes that will pursue these mopeds across London. The police also have special spray. So, for example, there's a possibility that the motorcyclist could get away. They will spray the motorcyclist, and then subsequently arrests have been made as a consequence of the spray that's been done on them. And the other thing that the police are doing is, you may have seen in movies, these things they put on the road to stop mopeds. They get punched by going over these things, and the police are not afraid to use those
Stinger
as well.
or something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah. And Karen, there's no consolation to you in relation to the loss you've suffered, but over the last period, the police in London have made significant progress in reducing the proliferation of moped crime. Moped crime has gone down over the last few months because of these targeted measures the police are taking around moped crime. They also, because of the increased resources from City Hall, are managed to analyse where there are particular areas of moped crime, particular boroughs and particular wards where it's higher, and they're taking action targeting covertly those parts of London.
Just quickly, because the story of the day is Brexit. You made yourself incredibly popular with Conservative MPs. Jacob Rees-Mogg is having a go at you, so is the Prime Minister. You're calling for a further referendum. You would have heard what Theresa May's dealing with today, and she said, I am not going back on my Chequers agreement. Why do you think, as a Mayor of London, it is your right or position to call for a further referendum?
Well, firstly, let me just clarify the position. So London, our capital city, contributes hugely to the UK coffers. Roughly speaking, a quarter of economic output comes from London. So if London struggles and does badly, the country suffers, not just London. I've been quite clear for the last 2 years and 3 months, although I'm disappointed by the verdict of the British public, I accept it. So I spent the last 2 years and 3 months working with the government. I've met David Davis 8 times, Prime Minister, Chancellor, taking people to meet with them, to work with them to get a good deal. I've been to Brussels to meet the presidents there, EU presidents, politicians, policymakers, to get a good deal, a soft Brexit, good deal. Now, what I'm saying now is, at this stage, it's quite clear one of two things is going to happen. Either a bad deal or no deal. And by bad deal, I include agreeing to leave the EU without agreeing what the future relationship is going to be. And I'm saying in those circumstances where the politicians have messed it up, the public deserve to take back control and have their first say on the outcome of the negotiations, not on whether we should have a rerun of referendum 1, not having never-endums, best of 3, best of 5, but a say on the outcome of negotiations, and that should include an option.
That's what Parliament is for.
Well, that should include. So my ideal is Parliament decides to have a general election, right? But it's possible that Parliament decides to reject the deal from the EU, and because now even the Prime Minister accepts a no deal is bad for our country, which would be catastrophic. The idea of and by the way, I took part in the debates. Boris Johnson in 2016, June, said we can leave the EU and have access to single market. Untrue. Liam Fox said a deal with the EU would be the easiest deal to make in history. Untrue. The leader of UKIP said you can make a deal in the afternoon over a cup of coffee. Untrue. So the circumstances in which the referendum took place have clearly borne out to be a combination of either lies or mistruths. In those circumstances, I'm not saying have a rerun. What I'm saying, give the British public a choice. The choice is the outcome of the deal with the EU that our government's negotiated, or stay in the EU.
Well, your leader of your party, has today called for a general election. We've already had a general election quite recently, haven't we? Are you at odds with him in relation to that?
No, not at all. The position of the Labour Party nationally is all options on the table. That includes a public vote in relation to the deal the government's done. The Labour Party set out 6 tests which the government's got to satisfy in relation to whether we accept the deal or not. The first option, of course, I think there should be a general election. This government's a bunch of, I think we need a competent government with Jeremy number 10 Downstreet. If Parliament...
And that appeals to you as somebody that's competent, does it?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Listen, the idea that Theresa May is competent, there are many words I can use to describe her. Competent is one of them. So the ideal is a general election. and which means Jeremy Corbyn and his team can be elected, hopefully as the government, and do a good deal with the European Union. If MPs don't vote for a general election, I think the next option is a public vote where the British public get a say, accept the deal negotiated by Theresa May, or stay in the European Union.
Let's take more calls, shall we? Kasima, good afternoon to you.
Hi, Kasima, you okay?
Hello, you're right.
Not bad, not bad.
Good.
Your question for the Mayor, please?
So my question is, in regards to the 45 million that you released as a direct response to help local youth organisations who were to support young people who were affiliated to knife crime, my question really is, why is the process for applying for funding so difficult? In a sense that you still have to apply online and wait up to 3 months for a decision, whereas in that time, more young people are dying. So I just wanted to know that if this was a...
Yeah, good question.
Good question.
Yeah.
I mean, you talk, I dare say, about the Young Londoners Fund, but I have heard this. I've heard it again and again and again. I'm big on charities, you know, and even yesterday, you know, charities say to me, how do we access it? Who decides who gives it? Can you just clarify that for us?
Sure. I mean, anybody, any charity, any normal person can just go to the website and see this. It's very easy. It's written in plain English.
Well, it wasn't easy for Kasima.
Well, let me explain. Let me explain to you. I'm speaking to you, really, not the listener who works with charities, not Kasima. God forbid,
Okay.
I'm rude to listeners.
Okay,
so
Kasima, be rude to me.
So the way it works, Kasima, is this. So there is £45 million over 3 years, and it's £15 million a year. Because one of the things that groups were saying to me is we need to have certainty of funding because we can't employ somebody on a 1-year contract, and that makes sense to me. So we've already released, actually, roughly speaking, £1 million just before the summer holidays to give young people constructive things to do during the summer holidays. We've tried to make it really easy. Of course, we've got to make sure there are the checks and balances. It's taxpayers' money. But the form is very easy, and there are different pots of money. So the first £1 million, roughly speaking, went out before summer. And I can announce exclusively on Eddie's show that tomorrow we'll be releasing the next £2.5 million to, roughly speaking, Kasima, 40 groups across London. It's going to help 10,000 young Londoners. And so tomorrow we'll be announcing, roughly speaking, 40 groups who will receive £2.5 million worth of money. And the idea, Kasima, is to roll it out in tranches, because if we release all the money at once, the groups couldn't cope with it. But also some groups have applied for smaller sums of money. Some groups, bigger groups, have applied for more sums of money. What we're keen to do, though, is to avoid the usual suspects. I've got nothing against the usual suspects getting this money, because you're right, Kasima, some groups haven't got expertise filling in forms. And what I'd say is, go to their website and I'm keen to hear your feedback, because we've deliberately spent time speaking to groups, say, how can we make it user-friendly? And they understand the importance of due diligence, making sure value for money, nobody's dodgy, goes to the right groups. And also what we've done, Kasima, is the announcement tomorrow, the groups that will receive the money will be in those boroughs which have the highest knife crime. Because obviously one of the things we want to do is target the money towards those communities who need it the most. And I know this from personal experience. If you give young people constructive things to do, whether it's a boxing club or a youth club, as I had when I was younger, it means they're not doing stuff that is not constructive.
Okay, I know we can getting close to time here, but let me just go back to Shuvik, who's asking about the Elizabeth line. And many companies would have been gearing up to have received people, to have received funds, not just about TfL's budget. Just tell me about emotion. Embarrassed, angry, confused. How did you receive that news?
So I received the news towards the end of August, so August the 29th, that sort of date, 30th. And you've got to remember, this line should open in December. It's been in construction for years and years and years. And I was angry, frustrated, disappointed, unhappy for a number of reasons. One, why does it take you so long to let us know there's going to be a delay? You could have told us last year, because people like your emailer, Shivak, and others have planned for this. Our shops in Oxford Street have planned for the Christmas sale. So I'm unhappy in relation to a number of things. One, if there are risks and challenges, that's fine. But the moment you think that could lead to delay, you've got to let people know. You've got to let people know. And so as soon as I discovered this, I did a number of things, including letting people know.
Well, before you tell me what you did, can you give me 10? I'm going to get in trouble because we're going over. Can you give me 10 minutes?
Of course I can.
What are the rules for going 10 minutes? Should we take a minute of news, or can I just carry on? Because I'm on a roll here. What are the rules?
By the way, he's not asking me, listeners. He's asking the producers.
I'm asking. Not I'm asking you. Hold on. I'm going to lock the door. We're going to take a couple of minutes of news because people are going to get their way around, and then we do 10 minutes. Yeah, is Is that right? Thank you very much. Mayor of London, stay with me for an extra 10 minutes. Let's go to Billy and find out what's happening on the roads.
Thanks, Ed. We've still got some closures in central London after the Ashura Day procession. So Parliament Square, Trafalgar Square, just a little bit busy. That will get back to normal shortly and buses will get back onto a route. The Kensington Church Street problem has now been completed. All investigation work after a accidental fuel spillage has now dissipated. Traffic will get back to normal shortly. Restrictions in the Rotherhithe Tunnel because of essential work taking place. Only cars and taxis pretty much being permitted through because there is now a height restriction and a weight restriction while these essential works take place. Billy Reeves, BBC Radio London Travel. More from me at 6:15.
Online, on digital radio and TV, and on 94.9 FM.
London's radio station.
BBC Radio London.
London's news at 6. I'm Catherine White. The mother of the Westminster Bridge attacker has told the inquest into the deaths of the 5 victims that she was utterly ashamed of his actions. Janet Ajayo said Khaled Massoud told her they'll say I'm a terrorist, but that she had no idea what he was referring to. Counter-terror police have arrested 2 15-year-old boys in Kent. The boys from Ramsgate were arrested at home this morning on suspicion of preparing for terrorist acts. A fire commander in charge at Grenfell Tower has told the public inquiry he never thought a cladding fire of that kind would be possible in the UK. Andrew Walton also said the stay-put policy was a design principle and not a strategy of the fire brigade. The Mayor of London has defended his record on public transport and knife crime. Sadiq Khan has been taking your calls with Eddie on Drive this afternoon. The Mayor announced exclusively that £2.5 million will be released to the Young Londoners Fund. London's weather, a warm and windy night with rain spreading from the west. Back now to Eddie and Sadiq Khan.
You are, of course, our eyes and our ears.
This is London.
Vicky says the 36, Park Lane to Peckham. Amazing diversity of London sites.
This is BBC Radio London.
Eddie Nestor.
Thanks so much for agreeing to give us 10 more minutes. I appreciate it very much, Mr. Mayor. So you say angry was your strongest thing. This is about Crossrail now. £600 million over budget, largest infrastructure project in the whole of Europe, and a person charged with scrutiny. And I have to say, you're in charge. Aren't you the person who was supposed to be scrutinising it?
Okay, so
no, tell me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, you're wrong. So the joint sponsors are the DFT, Department for Transport, and TfL, Transport for London, and DFT. They're the 2 joint sponsors. And the way Crossrail Limited was set up in 2008 was to be very autonomous and independent for reasons to do with lessons learned in the past. And so we, for example, didn't even have a say on how much they get paid or their bonuses. And so what we did, though, is this summer we agreed with them to have 2 more directors on their board. DFT got another director on their board. But even they weren't aware about any potential delay. And you got to remember, the Crossrail chair comes to TfL board meetings, comes to 2 separate committee meetings organised by TfL, and nobody's told there's a possibility of a delay till next autumn. So I'm told, end of August, listen, Crossrail is not opening in December, the central part, as was originally planned. It could be next autumn. And so obviously you appreciate at that stage, we realised there's an issue with the governance of Crossrail. I spoke to Chris Grayling very speedily to make sure we work together. There's no point Chris Grayling saying one thing and me saying something else. We've got to put aside our party differences, put aside everything else and work together. And I've got to give credit to the DFT and their officials working closely with TfL and our officials. And so what we're doing is a number of things. Firstly, making sure any revised schedule gives us confidence. Because Shivak and others will say, not being funny, you said the Central Park was going to open in December 2018. You're now saying autumn 2019. Why should I believe you?
Do you accept that it is incredibly embarrassing for London, the largest infrastructure project, 9 months late at least? Because I pressed them on this and they would not give me a date. So a minimum 9 months and £600 million over budget. Doesn't look good, does it?
It's not embarrassing for London. It's not London's fault this has been delayed. London should never be embarrassed in relation to an infrastructure project. But when Crossrail opens, it's going to be amazing. The Elizabeth line is going to be amazing. Also, I'm not satisfied. When people say to me, when engineers say to me, civil engineers say to me, listen, all infrastructure projects around the world are delayed, from Hamburg to Berlin to Boston. That doesn't cut with me because, this is, by the way, businesses have paid a third of this. this funding is quite unique. A third comes from central government, a third from London taxpayers, and a third from London businesses. So not only is your emailer, should he rightly feel aggrieved,
Are you confident?
businesses.
Are you confident that we won't be here in September of next year, 9 months on from when it was due to open? Are you confident, and can you reassure my listeners and Londoners that you've put the checks and balances in place to make sure we won't have this again?
I can't yet give Londoners the confidence that we will finish the project when we've been told by Crossrail with the most recent report. What we're doing now is trying to make sure we have the rigour in Crossrail Limited. So we've instructed somebody to do a report into governance, a very speedy report. I'll come back in a couple of weeks in relation to what the governance is like now, what it needs to be, and we're doing separate pieces of work. And at some stage, I will come out and say what the revised timetable is, but only when I've got the confidence in that revised timetable.
I appreciate you giving us a few more
Always
minutes.
a pleasure.
I appreciate
Can
it.
I come back again? You're going to allow me to come back again?
Nobody believes you, right? Nobody believes that you want to come back.
Oh,
or you're
my
looking forward
God.
to it.
Can I just
here.
say, if anybody wants to be a witness or a lawyer for a defamation case, then I have to reach me in City Hall.
You're a lawyer. We see how they turn now. Yes, sir, thanks for coming back. I appreciate
Always a pleasure.
it. I mean, look, we had lots of people who couldn't get through to you, so we'll get our people to talk to your firewall over there and see what we can sort out.
Great.
I appreciate you coming.
Pleasure.
Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan. BBC Radio London, thank you very much for listening. We'll play a trail, shall we?
This is London. Eddie Nestor's Drive Time. Weekdays from 4.